That Friday evening was the most intense and unforgettable night of my life. The house was so calm and peaceful that I had a rare sense of tranquility. I was exhausted after a long week and desired only one thing: sleep. As I fell asleep, I thought that nothing could disturb the calm of the night. I had been a single mother for 4 years since my divorce. My ex-husband and I didn't have a bad relationship. We had simply grown apart. Raising my son Jerry alone had been the most rewarding and difficult thing I had ever done. He was everything to me: intelligent, funny, and kind. But being both his mother and father was a real challenge. That night, I was so tired that I barely had the strength to put on my pajamas before collapsing onto the bed. The house was silent. Jerry had gone to bed hours earlier after playing video games and doing his homework. Finally, I had a moment for myself. In my room, the moonlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting soft shadows on the walls. I snuggled under the blankets, savoring the moment and letting my mind wander. Life had been calm lately, a welcome change after a difficult year. Jerry and I had been through many trials together since his father left, but we had managed to build a beautiful life. Even though Jerry was almost 22, we were still very close. He was always attentive and caring. Sometimes I feared he took on too much responsibility for his age. I smiled thinking of him. He was so kind, and I was lucky to have him in my life. But that night, I was too tired to think. I heavy and drowsy. Then I heard a light tap on my bedroom door. I half woke thinking I was dreaming. But there was another soft knock, and I was fully awake. "Mom," said Jerry, his voice gentle but loud enough to wake me. I blinked, trying to focus on the door. I could make out Jerry's silhouette in the faint hallway light. I sat up, trying to wake up completely. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice still trembling from sleep. He hesitated before entering the room and gently closing the door behind him. He seemed hesitant to come closer. "I couldn't sleep," he said. His gaze was fixed on the floor as he stood beside my bed. Lying there, I could clearly see something was bothering him. Since the divorce, Jerry sometimes had trouble sleeping, but he rarely talked about it. I knew his father had hurt him more than he let on, and that night I saw the sadness in his eyes. "Come here," I said softly, patting the empty space beside me on the bed. "You can stay with me tonight if you want." He hesitated a moment, then approached and lay down next to me. He lay on his side facing me, and I saw how tired he looked in the dim light. He also seemed vulnerable, which was unusual for him. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. Jerry shook his head, his black hair falling over his eyes. "No, I just wanted to be near you, Mom." He relaxed. It had been a long time since Jerry had wanted to be close to me like that, like when he was younger. I reached out and brushed his hair from his forehead. He smiled. "Okay," I whispered, placing my hand on his shoulder. "You can stay as long as you need." He smiled back. But I could see something was troubling him, something he didn't want to talk about. I didn't press him. Instead, I lay back down, the blanket over us both, and let the silence envelop us. We stayed like that for a while, savoring the calm. Jerry slowed, and I thought he had fallen asleep, but then he spoke so softly I barely heard him. "Mom, do you miss Dad sometimes?" His question surprised me, but I knew he was talking about his father. It was a question I had avoided for years, a question I didn't really know how to answer. "Sometimes," I admitted quietly. "But things weren't good between us, Jerry. You know that." I was worried, but he wanted to know more. "Do you think things could have been different?" he asked. I sighed, thinking of my regrets. "Maybe," I replied. "But we can't change the past. We have to move forward." Jerry looked down, fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. "I just wonder. Dad made his own choices. It wasn't about you. It was his decision, and it was never your responsibility. You've always been more than enough for me, Jerry," I whispered, my voice full of love and comfort. "You mean everything to me." He rested his head on my shoulder, but I couldn't fully ease his anguish, the weight of years of pain and that unspoken guilt. We fell silent. The silence between us acted like a balm, comforting him little by little. His relaxed, his deepened, and he fell asleep peacefully. But as he slept beside me, my thoughts raced and memories swirled in the darkness. We were both marked, and yet in the tenderness of that shared moment, an unexpected arose in me, indefinable. It was a diffuse sensation that washed over me, a connection that seemed deeper than the usual bond between a mother and her son. I tried to push it away. I turned away to focus on the rhythm of his, but it persisted, a persistent murmur that refused to be ignored. The morning came too quickly, the soft dawn light bathing the room in a delicate hue. Jerry was sleeping deeply beside me, his face peaceful and relaxed, as if the tension from the previous night had melted away. I watched him for a moment, my heart swelling with love and pride. Yet that unusual, persistent remained, an undercurrent mixed with my maternal affection. I got up carefully, taking care not to wake him, and went downstairs to make breakfast. The familiar kitchen routine offered a semblance of normality, but my thoughts kept returning to our conversation from the previous evening. Jerry had always been sensitive, but I hadn't realized how much he had internalized his father's absence. The guilt he carried, a burden I desperately wanted to lighten. But it wasn't just that conversation that troubled me. It was the way he had looked at me, the vulnerability in his eyes, the unspoken desire for something more. If I was honest with myself, what when I held him in my arms had awakened something deep within me, a bond that seemed to transcend maternal instincts. I tried to dismiss that thought. I focused on the pancakes cooking in the pan. He's just a child, I told myself. But the thought remained, a persistent murmur that refused to be silent. Shortly after, Jerry appeared, still sleepy, his hair disheveled, a picture of youthful innocence. Yet in his eyes, I saw a new maturity, a glimpse of the young man he was becoming. I greeted him with a smile, trying to hide the emotions that had since the previous evening. "Hi, sleep well?" I said, placing a plate of golden pancakes in front of him. "Hi, Mom," he murmured, sitting down and starting his breakfast with delight. We ate in silence, the morning sun bathing the kitchen in a soft light. His gaze rest on me for a moment, but I remained silent, hesitating to broach the complexity of the emotions from the previous night. He seemed more relaxed, more himself, and I didn't want to disturb that fragile peace. Finally, Jerry broke the silence, his voice filled with sincerity. "Thanks for last night, Mom. I needed that." His vulnerability surprised me. "You never have to thank me, Jerry," I assured him. "I'll always be there for you, no matter what." He nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on me. Something hung in the air. His eyes showed a new intensity, a depth that transcended the simple mother-son relationship. The day passed without notable incidents. Jerry retreated to his room, absorbed in his homework and video games, while I took care of household chores. Yet something in the atmosphere between us had subtly changed. It was an intangible transformation, a silent tension, a tacit recognition of a deeper bond that had emerged in the twilight. As night fell, my thoughts kept returning to Jerry, to his transformation from child to young man, and to the moment we had shared the previous evening. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that for him, this transformation had transcended the boundaries of maternal love. That evening after dinner, we settled on the couch to watch a movie. The room was dimly lit. The images flickered on the screen, casting shadows on the walls. We remained almost silent, at ease in each other's simple presence. But as the movie progressed, I became increasingly aware of his proximity, of how his arm brushed against mine. With every movement, my heart raced, and I tried to concentrate on the film. But the tension between us was palpable, a silent symphony of unspoken emotion. Midway through the film, Jerry moved closer to me, his arm pressing against mine. This time, he didn't away. The contact of his against mine sent a shiver of awareness through my entire being. I turned my head toward him, and our eyes met. In his eyes, I saw a new intensity, the reflection of emotions I had been trying to suppress all day. I reached out and took his hand. Our fingers intertwined. He didn't resist. On the contrary, it created a world that belonged only to us. Day after day, this bond grew stronger, more tangible. The initial conflicts were replaced by a sense of rightness, the certainty that this was exactly where I was meant to be. Jerry was no longer just my son. He was my partner, my confidant, my everything. It was on an autumn evening after 900 p.m. that I fully realized the strength of our bond. The sky was covered with gray storm clouds and rain drummed softly against the windows, creating a gentle melody. Jerry and I were snuggled together on the living room couch. A fire crackled cheerfully in the fireplace, spreading comforting warmth throughout the room. We lay down wrapped in a blanket. The warmth of the fire and our closeness isolated us from the storm outside. Jerry leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. I absent-mindedly ran my fingers through his hair, savoring the simplicity of this moment. The raindrops blurred the view through the windows, turning the outside world into an abstract, isolated canvas. I heard his become slow and steady, and I knew without him having to say a word that he also, this change in our relationship, this tension, this silent truth that had settled between us. Jerry lifted his head, his gaze met mine, and in an instant, everything became clear. It wasn't just love. It was a connection that transcended the traditional roles we had always played. It was a bond that had evolved into something deeper, undeniable. "Mom," he whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue, knowing that these words would change our reality. "I love you," he said, his hand seeking mine. "Not just because you're my mother, but for everything you are. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I can't help it." These words overwhelmed me like a wave, filling the room with a love so intense that my heart raced. I knew what he meant, but hearing him say it out loud, the depth of his emotion made it all even more real. "I know," I whispered, the rhythm of his Jerry. "Mom," I repeated, my voice trembling. "I love you too. Always have. But this is different." He nodded, his gaze searching mine, seeking reassurance, an answer to the unspoken question hanging between us. "I don't know what this means," I continued softly. "And that's okay." A slight smile lit up his face, and my heart overflowed with a joy I had never known before. "I'm glad you said that," he murmured. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't." I raised my hand to caress his cheek. "We'll find a way," I reassured him. "Together." We remained silent for a moment, our gazes fixed on each other as the fire crackled softly in the background. Words were superfluous. We had already said everything. We both knew what we were, and we knew it was real. Undeniable. Slowly, Jerry leaned forward, his eyes on mine, and gently, hesitantly, we, filled with all the love and restraint we had held back for so long. There was no urgency, no rush, only a pure and sincere expression of our deep bond. When he back, his eyes were filled with emotion, and I knew we had just crossed a line, a point of no return. But instead of fear, I was overwhelmed by a deep peace, the certainty that this was where we were meant to be. He gently took me in his arms, his hands around my back, and I snuggled against him, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The fire illuminated the room with a soft glow, stilling the moment. The outside world no longer mattered. We were alone in this universe we had created, enveloped in infinite tenderness. The evening dragged on like a soft mist, punctuated by light, soft whispered conversations. We didn't talk about the future or the implications of this new dimension in our relationship. Only the present mattered, sharing this suspended moment as the rain continued its gentle melody against the windows. I was amazed at how quickly our bond had evolved. Jerry was no longer the boy I had raised. He had become a man, and in that our relationship had taken an unexpected but beautiful form. That night, Jerry returned to my room. This time he didn't hesitate. He slipped into bed beside me. His arms enveloped me close. It was no longer the comfort-seeking posture of a son with his mother. It was the posture of two souls united as equals. I laid my head on his, listening to the calming rhythm of his heart, a mix of symphony and serenity, a peace I hadn't known for years, a completeness I hadn't even thought to seek. Whatever this relationship had become, I was ready to accept it. Jerry and I had always been close, but now we were more than that. Something that defied conventions, but perfectly right in our eyes.